You already know what you're supposed to do. You know your entry criteria. You understand risk management. You've studied charts for months, maybe years. You've watched hundreds of videos, read the books, maybe even taken courses. And yet, you're still not consistently profitable. Not because you don't know enough, but because knowing and doing are two completely different things. And that gap, that space between what you know and what you actually execute when money is on the line, that's where most traders fail. Not because of their strategy. Because of themselves. Let me tell you something that might be hard to hear. The reason you're not profitable yet has almost nothing to do with your strategy. It has nothing to do with whether you're using support and resistance or price action or any particular method. It has everything to do with what happens in your head in the 5 seconds before you click that mouse. Because that's where trading is won or lost, not on the charts, in you. Most traders operate under a massive illusion. They believe that somewhere out there exists the perfect strategy, the one that finally clicks, the one that makes everything make sense, the one that turns them profitable. And they spend months, sometimes years, searching for it, switching from one approach to another, trying different time frames, adding indicators, removing indicators, watching new content, joining new groups, always searching, always hoping that the next thing will be the thing that finally works. But here's the brutal truth. That perfect strategy doesn't exist. And even if it did, even if someone handed you a genuinely profitable approach with a proven edge, you'd probably still find a way to lose with it. Not because the strategy doesn't work, but because you'd execute it emotionally instead of mechanically. You'd break the rules when you're frustrated. You'd overtrade when you're bored. You'd revenge trade when you're angry. You'd exit winners too early when you're scared. You'd hold losers too long when your ego is involved. The strategy isn't the problem, you are. And until you accept that, until you stop looking for the next method and start looking at your own behavior, nothing changes. You just keep resetting. Keep starting over. Keep telling yourself that this time will be different with this new approach. But it's never the approach. It's always you. This isn't meant to be harsh. It's meant to be honest. Because once you see this clearly, once you stop blaming your strategy and start examining your execution, that's when real progress becomes possible. Let me break down what actually happens when traders fail. And I'm not talking about traders who don't know anything. I'm talking about traders who understand the technical side, but still can't make it work. Traders, like you. Traders who know what they should do but can't consistently do it. First, there's overtrading. You know you should wait for your setup, you know you should be selective, but you're sitting there watching the market move and you feel like you're missing out. You feel like doing nothing is wasting time, so you take trades that don't quite meet your criteria. You tell yourself they're close enough. You convince yourself that you're being flexible, not undisciplined. But you're lying to yourself. You're overtrading because you can't tolerate the discomfort of inaction. And every time you do this, you're training yourself that the rules don't really matter, that your plan is optional, that your feelings in the moment are more important than your process. Then there's impatience. You want results now. You want to be profitable this month, this week, maybe even today. You can't accept that trading is a long-term game that requires you to think in hundreds of trades, not dozens. So you force things. You try to make the market give you what you want on your timeline. You increase risk trying to speed up progress. You take setups that aren't there because you need something to happen. And all of this comes from the inability to accept that you don't control the timeline. The edge reveals itself over time, over repetition. But you can't wait for that. You need it now. And that impatience destroys any edge you might have. And then there's revenge trading. You take a loss and it feels personal. It feels like the market took something from you and you need to get it back. So you immediately look for another trade. Not because you see a valid setup, but because you're trying to fix how you feel. You're trying to recover what you lost. You're trying to prove that the last trade was just bad luck and you're actually still in control. But you're not. You're reacting. You're emotional. And every decision you make from that state is compromised. Revenge trading isn't about the market. It's about your ego. And your ego will bankrupt you if you let it. All of these behaviors, overtrading, impatience, revenge trading, they're not strategy problems. They're psychological problems. They're emotional regulation problems. and no amount of technical knowledge fixes an emotional problem. Here's something else that destroys traders: strategy hopping. You try something for 20 trades, maybe 50 if you're patient. It doesn't work the way you hoped. You have a losing streak. You start doubting, so you switch. You find something new, you convince yourself this one is better. You test it for a few weeks, same thing happens. So you switch again, and again, and again, and you think you're searching for the right strategy, but you're not. You're running from discomfort. Every time you switch, you reset. You go back to zero. You never give anything enough time to actually prove itself. You never accumulate the data you need to know if something works. You're always in the early uncomfortable phase of learning something new, and that phase always feels the same: uncertain, frustrating, full of doubt. So you mistake that discomfort for evidence that the strategy is wrong. But the discomfort isn't evidence. It's just discomfort. It's the normal feeling of doing something you haven't mastered yet, and instead of pushing through it, instead of giving your approach time to prove itself over a real sample size, you abandon it. You tell yourself you're being smart, being adaptive, but you're just avoiding the real work. The work of sticking with something through the doubt, through the losing streaks, through the periods where it doesn't feel good. Strategy hopping is a symptom. The real problem is that you can't tolerate uncertainty. You can't tolerate not knowing if something will work. You need immediate confirmation. And when you don't get it, you assume the strategy is the issue, but it never was. If this is resonating with you, if you're recognizing yourself in what I'm saying, leave a like and subscribe. Not for hype, not because I'm selling you something, but because this channel is about fixing the part of trading nobody talks about, the part that actually matters: your psychology. Let me tell you what I've observed after years of doing this. The traders who make it aren't smarter than the ones who don't. They're not more talented. They didn't find some secret strategy. What they did was develop the ability to execute a simple plan consistently, despite how they feel. They learned to trade when they're bored. They learned to not trade when they're emotional. They learned to take losses without it affecting the next decision. They learned to let winners run even when it's uncomfortable. They learned to follow their rules even when breaking them feels justified in the moment. That's it. That's the difference. Not intelligence, not knowledge. Discipline. The ability to do what you said you would do regardless of how you feel about it in the moment. And here's why this is so hard. Because discipline in trading isn't like discipline in other areas. In most things, if you work hard, you see results. Effort correlates with outcome. But in trading, you can do everything right and still lose. You can follow your plan perfectly and have a losing week. You can execute with discipline and still be in drawdown, and that breaks most people. Because they expect effort to be rewarded immediately. They expect that if they're doing it right, the results should show up right away. But trading doesn't work like that. The results lag. The edge only appears over time, over many trades, and if you can't tolerate executing correctly without immediate reward, you'll never make it. You'll break. You'll start doubting. You'll start changing things. You'll start forcing. And you'll sabotage the very process that would have worked if you just stayed consistent. This is why traders fail. Not because they don't know what to do, but because they can't make themselves do it when it's hard, when it's boring, when it's uncertain, when it requires them to trust a process they haven't fully proven to themselves yet. Here's what most people don't understand about failure in trading. It's not random, it's patterned. The same behaviors repeat. The same emotional triggers show up. The same mistakes get made over and over, and if you're not tracking this, if you're not examining your own behavior with the same attention you give to charts, you'll never see the patterns. You'll just keep thinking you need a better strategy, a better indicator, a better entry technique, but you don't. You need better self-awareness. You need to see what you're actually doing versus what you think you're doing. You need to recognize when you're about to overtrade, when you're trading from emotion, when you're breaking your rules, and you need to develop the capacity to stop yourself in those moments, to pause, to choose differently. That's the work, not finding the perfect setup, but building the internal capacity to execute an imperfect setup with perfect discipline. Because the setup was never the problem. Your execution was. And your execution is determined by your psychology. So let me reframe this for you. If you're failing at trading right now, it's not because you're not smart enough. It's not because you haven't found the right strategy. It's because you haven't developed the psychological skills required to execute consistently under pressure. And those skills aren't taught in most trading education. They're not about chart patterns or technical analysis. They're about emotional regulation, self-awareness, impulse control, patience, discipline. These are the skills that matter. And they're harder to develop than any technical skill because they require you to change who you are, not just what you know. They require you to confront your patterns, your triggers, your weaknesses. And most people would rather search for a new strategy than do that internal work. Because the internal work is uncomfortable. It's slow. It doesn't feel like progress, but it's the only thing that actually creates lasting change. The traders who make it are the ones who stop running from this work, who stop looking for external solutions to internal problems, who accept that the issue is them and commit to fixing it, not through motivation, not through trying harder, but through honest self-examination and deliberate behavior change over time. Here's what I want you to take from this. Your strategy is probably fine. If it has a logical edge, if it's been back-tested or proven by others, it's probably fine. The problem is you're not executing it the way it's supposed to be executed. You're adding emotion, you're breaking rules, you're overriding the system with your feelings, and until you stop doing that, no strategy will work. So stop searching for the next approach. Stop thinking the answer is out there somewhere. The answer is in you, in your ability to manage yourself, in your capacity to follow a plan even when it's hard, in your discipline to do what you said you would do regardless of how you feel. That's where trading is won, not in finding the perfect method, but in becoming the kind of person who can execute an imperfect method with unwavering consistency. And once you understand that, once you shift your focus from the external to the internal, everything changes. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually, trade by trade, you start to see progress, real progress. Not because you learned something new, but because you finally started doing what you already knew. Most traders fail. That's just the reality. But they don't fail because trading is impossible. They fail because they're fighting the wrong battle. They're trying to find the perfect strategy when they should be building the perfect execution. They're focused on the market when they should be focused on themselves. And by the time they realize this, most have already quit. Don't be most traders. Don't spend years searching for something that doesn't exist. Don't keep resetting every time something gets hard. Do the uncomfortable work. Examine yourself. Track your behavior. Build discipline. Develop the psychological capacity that trading actually requires. Because that's what separates the ones who make it from the ones who don't. Not knowledge, not strategy, psychology. Always psychology. This is Trader's Mental Edge, where trading starts in the mind.